Thanks for joining me on a very special episode of Live with Abuna, or in today's case, Live with His Grace. Today we're privileged to have with us His Grace Bishop Angaelos, General Bishop of the United Kingdom. Thank you so much, Your Grace, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Lovely to be here, and I'm sorry to have to change all your captions for just one program, but it's a privilege being here.
No, by all means. It's okay. We are honoured and blessed to have you here with us today, and we're very thankful that you're going to be answering all our youth's questions this evening.
I will try to answer what I can.
Good. Thank you, Edna. And Edna, for all our viewers at home who are unfamiliar with you or who don't know who Bishop Angaelos is, give us a preview or a caption of who Bishop Angaelos was. How did you get into monastic life, or how did you go from Egypt to Australia to London?
Well, if they don't know, they're not missing very much. That's the first point. But just for the sake of filling up some time, I was born in Egypt and we migrated as a family here to Australia. I lived here in Sydney. My childhood and my teenage years, I went to school here, did my tertiary studies, went to university. In 1990, so this coming January will be 25 years, I actually left Sydney and went to Egypt to join the monastery. I became a monk in October of the same year, served as secretary to His Holiness the late Pope Shenouda for 6 years in the monastery, from the beginning of 1990 to the end of 95. His Holiness then sent me to England to serve as a monk priest, where I served for 4 years. And in 1999 I became a bishop. Since then, I've done more international youth ministry. Besides our own youth ministry in Britain, I do more international youth ministry, so I travel more. I come, as you know, to Australia once a year to do a series of youth lectures. Likewise, I travel to other English-speaking countries. So just as soon as I get back, we'll be in Cairo for a few days for a service trip in Mu'attam. And then after that, I'll be off to West Canada for their annual youth convention, and so on and so forth.
Fantastic. Thank you, Edna. On that note, we actually have a caller who's just phoned in, and her name is Lydia, and she's served with you here in Australia. And by that grin, I'm presuming you already know who I'm talking about, so I'll put her straight through. Lydia, you're live with Edna. Go ahead.
Hi, Edna. How are you?
Lydia, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Well, thank God. We had the privilege of Lydia and Andrew were in England for quite a while, and they served with us, and they were very, very valuable members of our youth ministry then.
It was our pleasure, and we learnt so much serving with Your Grace. We were really touched by the service in London, and it was so fiery, especially with all of the youth, and how much everybody is so involved was really, really touching. It really inspired us to take our service and bring it here and do more than what we used to. And my question to you, Edna, is when we were serving with you, we found that St. Paul's ministry was a great way to evangelize. The masses that were held once a month were a great way to get people off the street to come in and just peek in and see what we do. What advice do you give to the youth here in Sydney to get started on evangelism? Because sometimes here it's a little bit scary for us to evangelize, and how to do it in a way that is welcoming as opposed to confronting.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Lydia's speaking about a ministry called St. Paul Ministry, and to get to know more about it, you just go to stpaulministry.com, stpaulministry.com, where we do a monthly all-English service in the centre of London, right near St. Paul's Cathedral. So almost, if you think of St. Mary's Cathedral here, it's the same sort of location, right in the centre of the city. It's a beautiful, iconic church, and I think the idea has always been to present our church in a very user-friendly way, in a very familiar way. So to Lydia's question about what the youth can do, first of all, the youth can't do this alone. It has to be proactively part of the church, part of the clergy. There has to be an idea, so you can take it to someone, but you're going to need someone to steer it. With a great group, I've got a wonderful steering group that works on it. Very, very good, passionate people who believe in it. So we've got to believe in what we're doing. The second thing is, I think we need to really believe and understand that we have something worth sharing. And I think that is sometimes a bit of a challenge. We can be quite critical of ourselves because we look at ourselves in a way that we don't value what we have. And it's very easy, it happens quite a lot in our own homes. We undervalue our own families, people around us, the things we take for granted. So we need to really value that we have something and that we want to share it. And then share it in a way that is approachable, palatable. And I think I don't remember all the words now, but if you look on the website, we have a very clear mission statement. We have a very clear vision and mission that Lydia and her colleagues there actually helped us to draft. And I think I'm more than happy for anyone to use those resources to help. We're actually, through our youth office, and Lydia will know Mariana Rahib, who's my youth programs coordinator, we are in the process of drafting up packs for each of our ministries, almost startup packs. So if anyone wants to start up a similar ministry, then we have an idea there of how to start, what to do, and how to go about it.
Okay. I hope that's answered your question, Lydia. So that's a very interesting service that you speak of, Edna. When did that start up?
It started now 2.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The first time we had a service was in, I think now March of 2012.
Mm.
It's a wonderful ministry. Numbers are increasing. We're getting a lot of people who are non-Egyptians, non-Copts. And it's a way of really presenting the church in a familiar fashion, holding on to our rituals, holding on to our Eucharistic prayers. And we're actually, again, on the website, we have a recording, we have the booklet, everything is there, so people are more than welcome to visit and have a look.
Fantastic. Thank you, Edna. Well, I'd just like to thank Lydia for her question and encourage everybody else to call in if you want. The number is 0416 551 292. And on that note of ecumenical prayers, Edna, we have a question that was sent to us via Facebook that says, where are we with the unification process with the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics? So I'm presuming the question is, in terms of unifying the two churches, how close are we to getting that process happening and how similar or different are we?
So these are two different processes. One is with the Eastern Orthodox Church. So as your viewers will know, there are two families of Orthodoxy. There's the Oriental Orthodox family, which is ourselves, along with the Armenians, Ethiopians, Eritreans, Syrians, Indians. And then there is the Eastern Orthodox, which is the Byzantine, so the Greeks, the Russians, and the Eastern European countries. Obviously, we have the same faith. We have the same dogma. What had separated us from the Eastern Orthodox Church was the idea of the person of Christ. We were accused of being monophysite. Monophysite meaning believing in only one nature. So that would assume that we deny either the, and I'm sorry to get technical here,
Go right ahead.
it would assume that we deny either the humanity or the divinity of Christ. And actually we deny neither. What we say is they are both in one inseparable unity within the incarnate Word of God, who is our Lord Jesus Christ. And so the term meaphysite rather than monophysite, because mea is composite, means it's one made of many, whereas mono is just one. So we're coming to that realization. We've been in dialogue now for close to 30 years. It was going very, very well. And then unfortunately, some years ago, we have two co-chairs, one on each side. So the co-chair on the Oriental side is His Eminence Metropolitan Bishoy of Damiat. The co-chair on the eastern side was the late Metropolitan Damaskinos, who unfortunately suffered a stroke and then passed away. And since then, there really hasn't been the proactive push from the eastern side. We did have a meeting of both families in Busan late last year, in October last year, during the World Council of Churches General Assembly, which meets once every 6 years. And we asked for the representatives of both families to go back to our churches and say, we'd like to have a push to the process. So some steps have been taken. We are looking to restart. I know from our side we're very happy to become one. As I must say is on the vast majority of the Eastern Orthodox side. Now, there are a couple of churches within the family that are still reluctant for whatever reason, and that's what we're trying to work on. But from our side, we're happy. I accompanied His Holiness the late Pope Shenouda and Metropolitan Bishoy to Constantinople, to Istanbul in 2001 to meet the ecumenical patriarch, who was the first among equals within the Eastern Orthodox family. And even back then, His Beatitude, Patriarch Bartholomew, said that we're very happy to be one, but they had a couple of pockets within their family and they were working on them. I saw recently, which was very, very encouraging, that there was a visit of a delegation from our side, bishops and monks, to Mount Athos, which was one of the areas of reluctance. So I'm hoping that's wearing down. With the Catholic, Roman Catholic dialogue, we have a separate dialogue, but again between the Oriental Orthodox family and the Catholic, Roman Catholic Church that meets once a year. Last year they met in India. We're discussing areas like the procession of the Holy Spirit and other areas with them. And again, we're hoping to be more unified. Now, I know I accompanied again His Holiness Pope Tawadros to the Vatican in May of last year to meet with Pope Francis, and it was a wonderful fraternal meeting. So I'm very hopeful that the spirit is that we're trying to become one where we can. In the UK, we've established something called the Oriental Orthodox Catholic Regional Forum, which I'm actually attending a meeting of as soon as I land in London in a few days' time. And that brings us together to work on the ground. So there may be theological differences that don't really touch the daily life of people, but we need to have a visible manifestation of unity. We need to stand together where we can, we need to speak together where we can, and we need to have a proclamation of Christianity in a unified way where we can. So I think I've always been a protagonist of splitting two things, and I made this suggestion, and it was thankfully taken on board, even within our synod, that we separate the theological dialogue from the ecumenical relations. So we don't compromise on theological dialogue, but that's the work of theologians to steer us. But in terms of our daily relationships, what we have in common far exceeds what separates us. And there is scope for us to work together. So I'm confident that that spirit is becoming broader, and I think it will take us further as time goes on.
Mm. Well, it's very promising to hear that from you, Edna. I think we were all sort of thinking, but we weren't sure how far along we were. So having heard that that explanation from you, I think that really sums it up quite nicely. So
I think we're very blessed that in the life of the late Pope Shenouda, and down the papacy of His Holiness Pope Tawadros, there's a great desire for unity. And so it's only up to us to make that a reality somehow. There's no reluctance from our side, and there is no denial of the value of unity. Because our division weakens Christianity as a whole. It makes us look weak and divided, and people will make assertions like our divisions between you are almost the divisions we see between Sunni and Shiite presence that causes the conflict, that leads to conflict, but it's not the same difference. We've never had a violent confrontation within our contemporary history. It's not that kind of presence. that condemns religion and says that religion is a cause of turmoil, rather than being actually a cause of peace and harmony.
Yeah, unfortunately, some people do make that similarity, but it's probably through ignorance and lack of education, or not knowing those processes or where we are, that draws them to those conclusions. So hopefully through that answer we can now answer those questions for people who think that as well. I'd just like to encourage everyone once again to phone in for your questions to Say Edna. The number again is 0416 551 292, or you can go to the website www.hisvine.com/LWHG, or Live with His Grace. So now we also have a question that's come in, and I think this one's with regards to female rights or women's issues or women's rights. And the question is the rank of cantor or epsaltos a rank of priesthood? If not, is there any reason why females can't be admitted to it?
Well, the process of priesthood, when you're speaking about cantors and readers and then subdeacons and deacons, so on, it's all part of the same process. And so it does fall within that broader line. But what I have seen, and what we do even in England, is we encourage the presence of a girls' choir, where it's not a liturgical choir, but they stand in the first 2 or 3 rows, and they function as a choir, because realistically, when you look at our liturgical books, there is no designation for the cantor standing outside. They are congregation. And so they just serve to lead the congregation. And so if there's a girls' choir there as well, and I've seen this in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and in many other of our own sister churches, it inspires people, because what I feel is we encourage young boys. They want to become deacons, and they're very inspired, and they want to do things, and they will drive their families to coming early, but the girls don't have the same encouragement or the same sense of ownership of liturgy, and I think we need to change that. So I think that's one way to do it, to encourage the learning of hymnology and association within prayer through young girls and young women as well.
So Edna, from your experience of being in Western cultures, both in Australia and in London, what do you think is the biggest or the most predominant or the most frequently asked issue or problem or concern that maybe the youth should look out for in Western society, in Western culture? So is it things like feminism? Is it things like secularism? Is it things like modesty? So what issues do you see coming up time and time again that are causing problems for our youth that you just thought, I wish everyone knew this, particularly in Western societies and Western cultures?
I think it's actually very difficult to distinguish now between young people in Western cultures and even in Egypt. The culture may be slightly different, but the challenges are now becoming the same. The difference between them is becoming much smaller. There isn't the same separation. Because of social media, because of satellite communications, they're exposed to everything.
It's a small world now.
It is literally the global village. I'm sure tonight, wherever you are in the world, we have lots of people listening from a broad spectrum of cultures. I think one of the things that really does challenge us, and it challenges me as much as it would challenge you yourself and all of our viewers, is prioritization. In terms of time, in terms of attention, in terms of focus, in terms of values. What do I prioritize? Is it my career? Is it my family? Is it my spiritual life? Is it my social life? And we've become consumerists. And that consumerist culture is not just about buying things. It's about having everything provided for us in a very particular way. So we've become very specific as to what we want and how we want it. You can personally bespoke design everything down to your exact requirement. You know, in years gone by, you would go in, find something, it sort of does the job, so you would buy it. But now we design everything. We feel that as consumerists, we have a right that everything becomes absolutely perfectly the way we want it. That's, of course, very good. But it also makes us lose a sense of our satisfaction and our simplicity. And so we try to satisfy particular areas of our lives, but in the process we lose other things. So whether it's career choice, whether it's lifestyle choice, whether it's cultural choices, we're very specific. And even in our spirituality, though, we live our Christian lives. We have this, and I'm sure you've heard the term, this shopping trolley approach, where you go down the aisle and you pick what you want. You know, I'll take this, I'll take that, no, I'll leave this one behind. And I think that becomes quite dangerous, because as consumerists, we don't need to buy the full package. I'll buy what I want. I'll tailor my own Christianity to the way I want to live it. And that's why we have lots of people who will cut a lot of corners. And we will start interpreting Christianity for ourselves alone. Now, of course, we must interpret Christianity for ourselves. But it should never be a completely soul process, because there is a lot of value in mentoring, in guidance, in making use of the experience of people who have preceded us. That's how we do everything, whether it's normal education, whether it's practical application of education afterwards, you know, in fields where you have to develop a career, you're mentored, you're tutored, you do placements first. Whereas we all think we can do spirituality very simply. And we kid ourselves sometimes, because we know we're not doing it well, but we reassure ourselves. So I think this consumerist mindset, along with this selective choice, creates a huge challenge for all of us.
That we don't prioritize the things that should be very important in our lives, our spirituality, and we then put things on top of that, whether it's career or social life or other things, and then thereby cut corners from our spirituality because we haven't got time to do it all or be it all or see it all.
There's one mistake that I think many people make, and I only came to this realization a couple of years ago, and that is we almost place our spirituality as a separate column along a graph with career and family and social life and everything else. And so we can lose one of those. It doesn't really matter. Whereas in actual fact, that's not how spirituality should be. Spirituality should be a foundation, an underpinning, under which each of these columns is built. So I am a Christian in my career, I'm a Christian in my family, I'm a Christian in my social life. And so no matter how busy you are, you can never just completely lose that column of Christianity or spirituality, because it becomes intertwined. If you want to visualize it, if you imagine beakers of water, spirituality shouldn't just be another beaker. It should actually be, with a dripper, something you take and you drip into each of those. So it tinges everything else. It becomes part of everything else. Indivisibly. And that's why we can then make moral decisions. If I'm making a moral decision at work, how many people have said to you, well, I just have to lie? Well, no, you don't. I just have to cut corners. Well, no, you don't. Likewise, in our studies, in our social lives, or in our relationships, or our families. So I think having that across the board helps us.
Mm. Thank you so much for that, Edna. That's it's a brilliant analogy, and I'm sure that it's painted a clearer picture for us. I'd just like to keep encouraging you to send through your questions again, and we have lines available, so call us on 0416 551 292, or you can find all the information on hisvine.com/LWHG. Stay with us, we're just going to go to a short break and come right back. Okay.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us again. Today we have a special episode of Live with Abuna. We actually have Live with His Grace, and we're joined today by His Grace Bishop Angaelos, General Bishop of the United Kingdom. So thank you for being with us today, Edna, and we appreciate all your words of wisdom and all your advice. And I'm going to touch on the previous comment that you made, where spirituality has to be the base and everything builds on top of that. We've actually received a question that says, as a HSC student, I struggle to balance between church and study and mostly pushing church away. How can I create that balance, and how do I rekindle the flame? So I feel that's really sort of connected to what you were saying in terms of if we think of it as columns, we can just push one away.
I think culturally we have a predisposition towards putting study before everything else. And it's because of the pressure that parents put on, and rightly so. It's very good to be educated. It's very good to have a career. But it puzzles me that sometimes parents themselves will stop people, or maybe introduce this mindset into their own children where it's okay not to have a spiritual pursuit because you're busy with your studies. And I think that's very wrong. Of course, academic life and career are important, and through our lives we have periods of priorities. So of course, if it comes up to exam time, I can understand people putting more emphasis and more focus than other times. But to completely wipe out any sort of manifestation of relationship with God. So I'm not praying, I'm not reading my Bible, I'm not spending time with Him, I'm not going to church, I'm even abandoning my community altogether and living as a hermit. Doesn't make sense to me. Especially, and I may be completely wrong, and apologies to your viewers if I am, especially when we have so much time wastage on other things. So I very much doubt that every HSC student or every presenter or every bishop uses 100% of his or her time absolutely efficiently. Mm. And I think that's one thing we need to look at. It's the efficiency of our time usage. I think we have more than enough time to do everything. Now, of course, and I'm looking directly at you here, if you're cramming just for exams, it doesn't work. But we shouldn't be in the place where we should be cramming. We should be consistently working, consistently engaged, and faith will not be due. There's more than enough time. Mm. We find time to do everything, and we should. We need to have a holistic approach to our lives. I've also seen many students who become so stressed because they have this mindset that they fail themselves when it comes to exams. And that's horrible because they have put so much effort and so much energy into it. And I think they weaken their position by being so intensely focused. At the same time, I've seen it too easily, and that's not right either. But the middle ground is of taking everything you do seriously. There is no reason why my academic life should be taken more seriously than my spiritual life or my family life. Am I going to have to prioritize sometimes? Of course. But should one completely overtake the other? Absolutely not. Mm.
I agree that it should be, back to what you were saying, prioritizing, that you prioritize, you know, your spirituality, your studies, whatever it may be. But I think sometimes we also have a caller who's just phoned in. But we're just going to put him on hold for 1 sec. But we've got another question that's come through as well. It says, I'm starting not to like my church. It doesn't feel like home anymore. How do you change that?
Well, I'm sorry, whoever it is feels like that. That must be a horrible feeling. Because the church is the place where we are supposed to feel at home. And no one should ever go to church and not feel at home, and that's really painful. It's painful for me to hear, and I'm sure it's very painful for the person to be living. There are many reasons why that could be happening. Some of them due to others, and some of them due to ourselves. If it's due to others, then that needs to change. I mean, we need to be welcoming of each other. We need to be embracing of each other. We need to create an environment where someone walks in and feels like he or she is at home. With that comfort, with that sense of, I can be slightly vulnerable here because I'm surrounded by brothers and sisters and I'm protected, I'm safe. We should also not have a picture in our own minds of what a Christian must be. We sometimes have these stereotypes, these prototypes, and if someone walks in not fitting that exactly, they're either looked at or looked down upon or rejected or grouped into something or other. And I think that's very dangerous. Our Lord, who is the model upon which we build our ministry, dealt faithfully and equally with everyone, loved everyone equally, and was, I think, very welcoming of everyone, whether it was fishermen or tax collectors or scribes and Pharisees or women at the well or lepers, all of them. And I think we need to do that as well. So we need to make our churches a place of welcome. And that means people who may have slightly different understandings or different perspectives or opinions. We don't demonize people. We embrace, we engage with, we welcome. What I've also seen is people from the other side who start to feel like they're alienated, so they insulate themselves even more, so that they feel even more alienated because they've built walls up. And I mean, some of your viewers might know I'm active on Twitter, and one of the tweets I sent out, I think last week, the week before, was a reflection that I had that sometimes the walls we build to insulate and protect ourselves become a prison that secludes us from the rest of the world. And I think sometimes being put in that position for long enough, we start to see everyone else as rejecting us, whereas we've actually, for whatever reason, and no one does this for no reason, there may be a right reason or wrong reason, consciously or subconsciously, they've felt they need to protect themselves. And in protecting themselves in this way, then it's obvious that they are also rejecting others. So I don't know which side that would fall into, and I would suggest that this person speak to his or her spiritual father, spiritual guide, parish priest, servant, someone in their family. Speak to someone. Don't feel isolated. Don't leave yourself feeling this way. I'm sure there is either a plausible explanation or someone who will say to you, I'm very sorry that's happened, let's fix it. But we shouldn't leave ourselves to feel like this for a long time. Otherwise, we'll end up becoming more and more isolated. And it's also a loss for the church community. I mean, every person who is not there as an engaged member is a loss to me and a loss to you and a loss to all of us. Because we are one body, and if one member is missing, then that member is missed.
Thank you so much for that say, Edna, so probably just seek guidance, maybe talk to your confession father and things like that. We've managed to pick up the caller that we had. He's a caller, John, from St. Abraham in Macquarie Fields. So go ahead, John, you're live with His Grace Bishop Angaelos.
Hello, Edna.
John, how are you?
To have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Good to have you, Edna. Edna, I have a question. We have bombarded with many videos and talks about the end of days and the events that happen nowadays on the political and economical level prove that we are on the end of days according to the biblical prophecies. Particularly, I was occupied by Revelation 9, 14, and 15, and I want just a light on this events that happen now. Are we really on the end of the end, like they said, or I mean, we have to be prepared, but we need to know the biblical prophecies in this area. Thank you, Sayyidina.
Thank you, John. If you're speaking about biblical reality, the scriptures are very, very clear. Our Lord Jesus Christ himself said, no one knows the day or the hour when the Son of Man is coming. Nobody at all. And with respect to financial crisis and the various other things that are happening, if you look at the Great Depression of the 1900s, if you look at medieval times when there was great poverty, if you look at the market crash of the 80s, and so on and so forth, there is always going to be that sort of challenge. And at every time, people look and say, the end is coming. All I can say definitively is today, the end of the world is one day closer than yesterday. That's all we can say. Mm. The scriptures have never tried to pinpoint the end of time. What they have done, even through the Revelations, is they have given us telltale signs of what it might look like. But I think what we do is we try to look at it in reverse. We look at the telltale signs and try to superimpose them on what's happening now, and then from that infer when the end is coming. Mm. Whereas that's never ever been the intent of prophecy. Prophecy has always been saying, when things happen, this might happen next. But we shouldn't superimpose retrospectively of what's been going on. We'll always find things, famines and wars and challenges that will always be interpreted as the end of time. To answer John's question, and I share his concern, I think we waste far too much time wondering when the end is coming. Whereas we should just prepare ourselves for it. Because in actual fact, if I die today, then whether the end of times is next week or next month is irrelevant. So for each and every one of us, the end will be at different times. It's the time when I leave this earth. And that shouldn't be a frightening concept, by the way. That should actually be encouraging and joyous, because as Christians, we are going to the kingdom. So we shouldn't fear death. We shouldn't look at death in a way that shocks us into doing things. It's a realization that this is the only sure thing in life, that once we have been born, we will die. And so in that sense, it's not a frightening thought.
Mm. Thank you, Edna, for clarifying that. There's always a doomsday prophecy around the corner in some way, shape and form, so it's good to be able to put that to the side and clear those those thoughts or ideas that people have. We also have another caller now, Angela from London. Thank you for joining us, Angela. Please go right ahead.
Hello, Your Grace.
Angela,
Lovely to
nice
watch
to,
this
Angela's one of our youth servants in the UK, and she's actually my communications and media officer in the church, doing a lot of good work for us.
So she's staying in touch, keeping in
She
touch
is.
with you.
I am being monitored all the time.
Then she's doing it right.
Well, I'm particularly enjoying this interview. I think it's a really great thing for youth. So I just wanted to get in there and ask my own question. Your Grace, it's lovely to see how you carry out your ministry and your service, because you do it with such faithfulness and commitment. And because so many of us can see that, I just wanted to ask you, what personally drives you forward to just go about your ministry every day with such thankfulness and joy and fervour, and how can we learn from that?
I think people closest to me will realize that I do as much as I can for as long as I can. And it's because I really believe in it. I just said this recently during one of my talks. I find it's a privilege for me to be able to share God's word with people. And I love doing it because I believe it's such a wonderful message. I believe it's a message of hope, a message of encouragement, a message of empowerment. And I think because I love all of my children, I want to share the most precious thing I have with them. And that is the message that I've received. I feel I've been called to this ministry. And I feel it's a very particular calling. You know, I do lots of things, as you made mention, ecumenically in terms of official relationships. But what I think really gives me grounded is my pastoral ministry. Because at the end of the day, we're pastors, we are shepherds. And everything else becomes very dry without that. So, and you know, I see a lot of wonderfully inspiring servants, whether it's other bishops, priests, young men and women who are serving. We have so much in that blessing in our church that I think we're very fortunate. And I think the thing that will allow us to serve most competently is to feel the love and joy and grace of God, so that we can then give it, present it. Our Lord said to his disciples, freely you have received, freely give. And we have received freely with abundance. I was just speaking yesterday at St. Abanoub about the cascading effect of being filled. So if one person is filled and overflows, then people around that person are filled and they overflow, and so on and so forth. And what starts with one person ends up being a whole community. And so I think we need to work to being filled and overflowed. And once we overflow, we then fill people around us.
Well, speaking of being at St. Abanoub's Church, we actually have a caller from St. Abanoub's. We have Abanoub from St. Abanoub's in Blacktown. Thanks for joining us. You're live with His Grace. Please
Yes,
ask away.
you. How is Edna?
Abanoub, how are you?
Good, thank you. Very nice. So a great blessing. You're a great blessing to Sydney.
Thank you, Javier. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. My question for you today, Edna, is if you've prayed about something a lot and you're ready to take an action, how do you know if it's the right thing to do? If you're like, how do you know if God is if this is God's thing? This is what God wants.
Thank you. If I were to graph all of the questions that I receive in youth ministry,
Would that be number
that
one?
one is up here somewhere. It's even off your screen, if you can tell. And it's because we all want to know. But there's a difference between wanting to know God's will and fortune telling. And I'm not in the business of fortune telling. Neither should any of us be. To know God's will means to know God first and foremost, and to have a consistent relationship with Him. Because if I know that, then I'm going to know what He wants for me. But if I'm only going to try to know God's will if and when the need arises, then it's going to be hit and miss every time. So, Sarah, if I know you well enough, I will know what you want of me, generally without asking. In certain situations, I'll understand this is your requirement of me. Or likewise with Abanub or anyone else I deal with. But if I don't, I'm going to have to somehow look for clues or try to read your mind or try to guess or do something to understand what you want. And that comes in our relationship with God as well. If we know Him well enough in our lives and we've seen Him deal with us, and that's the beauty of being born as infants. We grow and we feel God's hand from childhood through adolescence into adulthood, and we experience Him. So if we've been faithful in that relationship, by then we have a clearer understanding of what He wants. As you would with a childhood friend or with your parents. Now, as growing up, I'm sure that by adolescence, you know what your parents want. You know if you're going to ask for that thing, whether they're going to say yes or no, because you know them. And so if we had the same relationship with God, that would happen as well. But if we're going to use God as an emergency switch when the need arises, then it's going to be hit and miss. And then we try to read things. So you try to, put pieces of paper on the altar. And I'm an absolute believer in praying for things. But having this altar ballot approach to every decision in our lives doesn't work. Now we use it in the choice of a pope. But even before that, we have chosen, we've selected, we've narrowed down, we've elected, and then we use it as a very last stage. Saying, God, we don't mind what you choose for us. Just choose. But for some people, this is the first port of call, or sometimes even the only thing they do. And it's not a safe option. It's not a lottery.
Well, speaking about knowing God's will and finding what God wants for us, I have a question here that says, how can I know if monastic life is for me? Can I ask you before we go to that question, how did you know that monastic life or that path was for you, say, Edna? Was it something, that you just felt inside of you? Was it a calling? Was it something that you knew you wanted to do from very early on and it just grew? Or was it something that happened in your life and that was a turning point?
I think looking in retrospect, you think, yeah, that makes sense. All of these things gathered up. But as anyone who approaches monasticism, we live very normal lives. We go along with our lives. We experience things, and then it develops within us gradually. In terms of knowing whether it's the right path or not, I think there is sometimes a misunderstanding that monasticism is just a switch you turn, and then you go from this life into monastic life. Whereas the more precise assessment of it is that I live with God so much in this world, and I give of myself so much, and I spend so much time with Him, and I enjoy Him so much that suddenly I get to a stage, well, this just doesn't cut it anymore. It's not enough anymore. I need to totally dedicate myself to Him. And that's where the change happens. Very much like an engagement period, where people then think, okay, I'm getting to know someone, okay, I need to live my life completely with this person. And I think that courtship progresses gradually. If we look at our lives, what does a monk or a nun do? They pray, they worship, they give their lives to God, they live faithfully. Obviously, at the time they take their vows of voluntary poverty, celibacy and obedience, that's a point after which their life totally changes. And so I think people who are looking at monasticism need to see, are they living a monastic life already? A monastic in terms of, am I sharing time with God? Am I dedicating time to Him? Have I completely saturated my time to the extent where I can think, can't do this anymore, I need to go somewhere and be with Him alone? Saint Arsenius, was asked once by his brothers in the monastery saying, "Brother, do you not love us anymore? We don't see you." And he said, "God knows how much I love you, but I can only spend time with God or with you, so I've chosen to spend time with God." So the understanding of monasticism is leaving all to be with the one. Not avoiding all, not running away from all, none of that. It's actually loving everyone, but loving God just that little bit more. So for people who are looking to monasticism, I would say carry out your daily life with God. Pray, fast, reflect, read your Bible, work to glorify God. And at the time when that reaches a peak, then you can think of taking the next stage.
Thank you so much for that, Your Grace. That's very beneficial, and we've got time for one more quick question, so I'm going to try and squeeze it in here. It says, how can I be a witness to my friends and still be accepted?
I think the choice is, do I just want to be a witness to my friends, or I just want to be accepted? We've got to realize that sometimes to be a witness means you'll be rejected. Now, hopefully it won't be all the time, but sometimes it will be. So what we need to do is to be a witness regardless. Our role is not to be accepted or rejected. It is to be a witness. It is to be light in the world. Light doesn't come in through a window and think, am I going to be accepted here and rejected there or not? Light just comes in and covers everything. And so we need to be witnesses in everything we do. If we're accepted, then that's great. If we're rejected, then that's a shame, but we hope that even that rejection in itself becomes a message to people to say, you don't always have to be popular to be right. You can make a decision humbly, graciously. Don't walk around thinking that you're better than other people, but humbly and graciously witness with the meekness of Christ, but also be powerful and be strong. Don't be reserved in it. Really believe and proclaim what you believe in a way that brings God into the midst of people and gets them to glorify Him.
Thank you so much, Your Grace. We really appreciate you being here with us and taking time out from your busy schedule. I know you're being rushed off to St. Mary's now for the youth meeting, so we won't keep you, and we are so blessed and honoured to have you here, and you've been an inspiration to all the youth of Sydney, and we've missed you, and we love having you and we love seeing you, and we thank you so much for your answers and your words of advice and wisdom, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you as well for joining us on this special episode of Live with His Grace on CYC, and we hope that you'll join us for the next episode. Keep your questions rolling on the Facebook page and Twitter, and the SMS 0416 551 292. Thanks.